Well, hello, hello.
Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to Let's Talk.
Welcome back to our session today. So I'm Leanne. Hello, nice to see you.
And I'm Jason. Nice to see you as well from Los Angeles. And this is Let's Talk.
As you know, this space is where no topic is off limits. We'll be discussing things from well-being and resilience, leadership, money, relationships, mindset, and so much more.
And as always, here at Let's Talk, we bring different perspectives, real stories, those honest conversations, because the things we don't talk about often end up being the things that we need to talk about most.
Yeah. And our goal here is really simple. It's to spark new ideas, to shift mindsets, and to give you practical tools that you can use both in your leadership and in your life. So, welcome back to Let's Talk. This is series 3, The Art of Intentional Living. Um, and I think it's such a great conversation because we need to live with intent. Last episode, we spoke about the knowing doing gap, and why awareness alone doesn't create the change that we're hoping to affect in our life, right? And today we're going to talk about what actually drives change, and that is clarity. Because without clarity, we drift, we float, we kind of second guess ourselves. We stay busy doing busy work, but not necessarily the work that's going to move the needle for us. And without intention, we just get busy. So clarity isn't about knowing what we want, or not, it's not just about knowing what we want. It's about creating a vision that's so compelling that it pulls you forward. So rather than pushing against something, we're going to be pulled forward. And that's really what we're going to be discussing in depth today.
Yes. And, we first want to talk about why most people lack clarity. Um, and when we think about it, most people don't lack the capability to do something. They lack the clarity around it, which is an important distinction because capability and clarity are two different things. You can be totally capable of doing something, but if you're fogged in, that vision is not going to be pulled forward. It's going to stay stagnant and in the fog, and you know all those emotions are going to fester forward. So some of the common patterns that we see around the lack of clarity is, I don't know what I want. How often do we hear that? Whether that's you're saying that to your own self or from other people. I don't know what I want in life. I don't know what I want for my career, or whatever area of life it may be. Or it's I have too many options. And then you get so overloaded that it's just like I'm putting it on the back burner, right? Or it's that I feel stuck or overwhelmed. And that can also cause that stagnant, you've heard me in many other episodes say the hamster wheel, right? I feel stuck and overwhelmed, stuck and overwhelmed, stuck and overwhelmed. And it's just like that record player, like on those vinyls, if it ever had a little scratch in it, and then it'd be like, did it. um, totally. And those of you who are old enough to remember vinyls are coming back actually. But those are some of the common patterns that we see, right? So when we see these patterns, individuals tend to stay in the indecision, indecisive mode, overthinking, overanalyzing, analysis paralysis, or the mother of all efficiency is procrastination. So confusion is often a form of protection, right? It's sometimes easier to stay in that protected, well, I'm confused about it, and I know I'm confused about it, so I don't really have to do anything, right? So if you're unclear and you don't have the clarity, then you don't have to act on something, which plays right into that, some of that knowing doing gap, right? Like sometimes that knowing doing gap can have some unclarity as well. So I don't have to act. I don't have to have the risk of failing to then feel bad or look bad in front of, friends, family, colleagues. Um, and you also don't have the risk of being seen. So these are some of the common patterns that we see, some of the areas that people stay in when they don't have clarity, and then some of those sub patterns that happen as well of the act failing and risk of being seen. Leeanne, I'll turn it over to you for the next section.
Yeah. And, I was just going to say, playing small is safe, right? So, and we know that our brain tries to protect us, which leads me to the next part here, where we're going to have a look at the neuroscience of clarity, because, that's my sweet spot and your sweet spot also, Jason, where we, look at what happens in the brain around these topics, because once we know better, we can do better. So let's break down what is happening in the brain when we're um, unclear. Because the truth is, the brain needs a target. The brain likes to know where it's going. It needs a target. Your brain is goal directed and it's a prediction machine. We've talked about this before. It likes to know what's going to happen. So without a clear target, it defaults to our habits that keep us kind of in our comfort zone. It stops us from actually stepping outside of that. We then recreate patterns of behavior that, consistently show up in our lives. And some of our habits, as we've discussed before, actually started with positive intent, even though they may no longer serve us. And the same with the patterns that we've created. Like all of these things have been there to protect us. However, they stop us from moving. And so we need to have a clear target. We need to have something that we're kind of focused on and working towards. Otherwise, we kind of just drift and we're aimless, as you said earlier. The second thing that happens is our reticular activating system, does this cognitive priming. So um, it looks for things that are familiar, basically. So when we are working towards something new, there's not a lot of familiarity. So our alarm system goes off and your brain really starts filtering for certain things. So just to give you an example of this, if we've got a target in mind and we're working towards it, our brain will find things in alignment with the new target. If we don't have it focused on a target, our brain's going to keep finding other things that it's familiar. The other side of this is, I'm sure you've done this too, Jason. Whenever you go to buy a new car, you make a decision on the sort of car that you want to buy, and then all of a sudden you start seeing that car everywhere because your brain starts filtering for that car. It's like, I didn't see that before, and now it's everywhere. Like, what happened, right? I thought I was being unique, and actually I'm not. This car is all over the street. So the same thing happens when you set a goal, right? If you set a goal, then your brain starts filtering for opportunities. Things become visible that you might not have seen before. So clarity actually changes what you notice. It changes what you're filtering for so you can see things differently. And you don't find opportunities, you recognize them based on what you're priming your brain for, what you're focused your attention on. So if we've got this goal in front of us and we're priming our brain for that, then behind the scenes, subconsciously, our brain starts looking for opportunities to make that right. And I love the idea of that because it happens at a subconscious level. We're not actively searching, we're actually recognizing based on what we've actually primed our attention to. And I think that's really useful to know. So be careful what you focus on is really the key. Because whatever you're
Mhm.
focusing on, your brain will then look for um, proof of that, and opportunities around that. So if we're focusing on lack and scarcity and what we can't do, our brain will find that and show us that. But if we're focused on, a target, a goal, and what we can do, then our brain will recognize the patterns around that, which is
Totally.
really interesting. And the other thing is also that our emotions drive focus. We know this, right? Our brain prioritizes what feels important to us, what feels meaningful. And if we've got goals that are kind of flat, they won't move you forward, right? If we don't have some sort of emotional buy-in, we're not that inclined to pursue it. We're not that inclined to keep going, even if we kind of hit a stumbling block or a roadblock or a speed hump along the way. So a compelling vision will actually get you moving, not a flat goal. And that's really what we need to focus on. We need to focus on coming up with a compelling vision because a vision is more aligned. It pulls us rather than us fighting against our natural resistance. So we need to really have something that we're working towards, focus our attention on that so our subconscious can find the opportunities, but have it be so emotionally charged that
Mhm.
we're actually pulled along the continuum.
Yeah, and I think that leads nicely into this vision versus goals, discussion, because this is where a lot of people actually get it wrong, right? You know, they set these goals, whether they're small goals or very audacious goals, but if they set those goals without vision, it's going to be a much more of a pushing the rock up the mountain or at a glacial pace than what you would like. And I think that's also where like a lot of frustration actually gets into the mix, right? So when we talk about goals, right, we want to make sure that we use, and I'm sure maybe some of our listeners have heard of SMART goals, um, which what does SMART stand for? SMART stands for making the goal very specific, right? Making it measurable. So, like a to doable measurable, right? Making it achievable, realistic, and outcome focused. So, I'll run through those again: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time slash outcome focus. So when you have goals in a I mean, it's like a simple framework, right? It's easy to remember, and you if you use it effectively, because I've used this in organizations that I've worked in that actually had you put your goals to SMART goals. If you use it correct, it actually helps cut out a lot of the weeds and a lot of the unnecessaries that you really don't need to get into when you're setting a goal towards a vision forward. And what is missing at the heart, though, is making sure that the goal is attractive, like attractive to you, it's aspirational, it's aligned, and I always like aligned with your values, right? Um, and that it's alluring.
Yeah, and I often
This,
say, so if I can just jump in
yeah.
there, Jason, I often, when people are setting SMART goals, I get them to change that achievable because we know that we can achieve anything we put our mind to. And I actually
Mhm.
get them to change that to aspirational because that builds the juice, right? The emotional buy-in that we need to stay the course.
Yeah. Well, and I think that achievable really comes in that T part, in the outcome focused, in the time bound. Um, and I agree with you too. That aspirational, just it just tweaks it in a different way cognitively, that you think about it differently, right? So once you have the SMART goal formed, replacing, like Leanne said, achievable with aspirational, this is where the vision comes in. So when you think about vision, you want to make sure that it's emotionally charged, that you have some oomph underneath it, right? Like, if you envision yourself when you're emotionally charged in a positive way about something, right? Like, you're just more eager to go do it, more eager to like get it accomplished and get it done, and have that dopamine, feeling to come in to say, you know what, I've this is a goal, and it was aspirational, and it's accomplishing towards the vision that I set. I mean, you just think of it different and you use different language around it, right? And also, it's identity driven. So when we were talking in episode 21 around identity upgrades, putting that identity part is so important. Like, identity, values, like, putting those two things in, it's amazing on how much more powerfully constructed the goal is. Because it's, you know, when you think of goals, especially if you work internally, right? And you're really given goals by your boss or by your leader, they're not your goals, they're their goals. And oftentimes you're really not emotionally charged around it. You're like, okay, this is another goal that blank wants me to do. And, so you kind of half ass it. But those organizations that actually put in enough trust into their staff to develop their own goals, that's when the magic really happens, that I've seen. And I can just speak for me, from my time in organizations. It's when the goals are leader driven versus like, hey, yes, this is what we need to accomplish, develop your goals. There's just a different sense of ownership around it.
Yeah, and I think what good leaders do very well is that they may still have the organizational goals, let's face it, because we need to kind of work towards that. But
Mm-hmm.
then they work with the individual to set up personal goals
Yeah.
around their identity and who they want to become and what they want to learn and who they want to be in the organization, and link that to the organizational goals. And
Yeah.
that's the sweet spot. Because if we don't do that with the individual, then you're right, we do half-ass it. We've been voluntold, we're not volunteering.
Yeah.
And we don't have that emotional buy-in. But if the organizational goal is X, and for me to, my personal goal is over here, but if I do that, then that's gonna impact that leadership goal, then we've got magic, right? Like,
Yeah.
everybody is moving in alignment towards their own personal goal, but also the organizational goal, and it comes naturally if we can link the 2.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's that future part of it just moves so much smoother and so much more into alignment and into fruition, versus if it's the opposite, right? It's like the future part of it seems so far down the road. That's why a lot of times you get people to leave, or, you know, um, half-ass, etc., all that. So to kind of put all this together, right, around goals and vision, the goals will tell you the what, the vision will tell you why it matters. And having those two, I think, speaks well into what you were just saying, Leanne, around like when the magic occurs. It's when you have the what and the why it matters, those two linked together. It's just amazing. And so, if you want to think of it in another way, you can also think of it in goals push you, vision pulls you. So you kind of have that, you know, versus where it's working um in a tug of war with each other. It's actually moving smoothly together.
Well, I
So
like the idea of being pulled, rather than pushing, like hustling, working hard, like, as you that analogy you used at the beginning, the pushing the rock up the hill, right?
Hmm.
It's much easier being pulled than it is doing the pushing, let's face it. So the vision really gives you it's the secret sauce.
Yeah. Yeah. I know I was just messaging a friend earlier today, and they're dealing with some uh, medical stuff, with a sibling and having to work with the Medicaid system. And, those systems work at a glacial pace. So they are definitely not this. I mean, it's a this, or just like if you think of a glacier, how it moves so slow. Um, so anyways, but to give like an example of this, right? Of you have a goal is I want to earn more money. Okay. So the vision around that could be that I'm financially free. I'm making empowered choices for myself, and I'm living with ease and expansion. It's just like I was in a conversation earlier today, and somebody asked me that, they're like, well, why did you become a consultant? Versus just going back and getting a full-time job. I was like, well, it's because I wanted more free time. Like I didn't want to have to work the 40, 50, 60 hour weeks, right? So it was like I had a goal and I had a vision with it. And they're slowly moving, but they're moving in the right direction. Um, and one more example of this is I want to lose weight, right? That's your goal. But then your vision could be that I'm stronger and I'm healthier than I've ever been and I feel great. Um, and I know, Leanne, you and I have talked about different goals and visions within the health realm, and it's amazing when you put in that vision part, just the goal becomes so much more alive than it just sitting on its own.
Absolutely. And so even changing what we call our goals can have a big impact, right? So have them more vision aligned. So rather than, losing 20 kilos, it's something like, getting into those, my teenage jeans or something, like bringing in something that actually builds that emotional attachment to it, that vision of why you're doing it, being hot. I think, I had a goal. It was like I was serene and sexy, or fine and fit at 50, or, whatever it is. But the fine and fit, I had a vision of what that looked like. And here I am, and working towards that still. And it's fantastic because I've got that vision. If I didn't have that, then, I may not get up and do what I have to do every day to bring to life the work that I do, or the exercise and the self-care stuff. So it's the vision and the languaging that we use that makes
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
so much difference. And this is where, we can actually have an effect around the most powerful shift that we can make is when we stop asking, what do I want? And start asking, who am I becoming? Right? Like, who am I becoming? I'm becoming the strongest, fittest, most serene version of myself. Like, and I really want that. Like, I don't want to just get fit. Like, it's all about who I'm becoming, because behavior follows identity. And we've said this week after week recently that our behavior will follow the identity that we hold. Your future self needs you to step up, and you need to spend time thinking about what that future self actually is. Like, who is this future version of you? And ask yourself some really deep questions. So I would highly recommend grabbing a notepad and pen and writing these questions down, and then giving yourself some space to actually reflect and answer them. So this
Yeah.
is about your future self. Yeah,
Leanne, can I just put in just one thing for
please.
our listeners before you go into these questions? Is because I know we have listeners from all different age ranges. Like, if you're older, like in your 60s and 70s, that doesn't mean you can't live into your future self or can't design what your future self looks like. Because I hear that a lot from older generations. It's like, well, it just is what it is, you know, eh, you know, I'm not going to have this, I'm not going to have that. Okay, you might not have those, but you could have this and this. So I just wanted to put in that little caveat that this is not age bound. I mean, you could be 100 years old and do these questions that Leanne's about to go into.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the future self could be the tomorrow version. It could be the next week, the next month, the next year, 10 years. It really doesn't matter. But it is, who do you want to become? Because you can teach an old dog new tricks. We're not fixed in our current patterns of behavior, and we're not fixed in our current identity. We have choice around that. So the first question is, this future self of yours, how do they think? What are the things that they think about? What do they prioritize? What's most important to them? What do they tolerate? Because that's an interesting question. Like, what do you actually tolerate? Do you tolerate being overweight, being unhealthy, feeling like crap, having sore joints? Or what will you no longer accept? I think that's such an interesting question. I asked myself that question coming out of a relationship. What will I no longer accept? And it's completely shifted um, what I look for in myself now before I even consider partnering with somebody else, because it starts with us, right?
Mhm.
How does that future version of you show up? What do you stand for? What do you want to be remembered for? And, that doesn't have to be a global kind of legacy. It could be, how do you want to be remembered by your children, by your family, by your colleagues or neighbors? But asking yourself these questions, what legacy do you want to leave? Um, they will help you to get really in tune with who your new identity is, what this future version of you is. And it's that version that will help you to achieve your goals, because your current habits make sense for your current identity, but your future requires a different version of you. Your future self requires you to step up, step into that future version. And that's not to say that you're going to get it 100% right now, but if you're
Mhm.
making small shifts now, you're heading towards that vision that you have for yourself. Like, I know I'm 54 and there are so many things I still want to do, right? But if I stay with my current identity, I'm never going to achieve them. So
Mhm.
every day I am evolving. Every day I'm looking at these questions. I'm asking myself, what does my future self need me to do today? What decision do I make now that my future self will be grateful for? I could just sloth on the lounge and watch Netflix, or I could study something, or I could, that my future self actually wants. So we can challenge ourselves every day around this. We don't have to stay in the same identity. In fact, as I've said, your current habits make sense for now, but your future requires a different version of you. So step up, buddy. Now is the time to step into your tomorrow. Really, that's what it's about. Because
Yeah.
all the things that we want to achieve require us to show up differently. Because if we keep doing the same thing we've always done, we're going to get the same results we've always got, right? In order to
Yeah.
get a different result, we need to do something different. So we've got to step
Yeah.
into that future based version of us now and have it pull us forward.
Yeah. And I think that that's, I think that's like a perfect moment too for folks to really lean into their creativity. You know, I mean, we're all creative beings. I mean, yes, some may be more creative in the arts, or some may be more creative in technology or engineering, whatever it may be, but we're all creative beings. So, you know, so what Leanne was just talking about, like part of that is leaning into your creative side to be like, okay, like how can I look at this different, or how can I innovate differently, or like just what's not serving me any longer with my current habits in order to get to this future you.
And if we think about what I discussed earlier around the ACC, in our brain, the fact that it will search for, subconsciously search for things. So if we're focused on that future self, opportunities will miraculously avail themselves to us because we'll notice. They opportunities may have been there anyway, but if we didn't have the identity that thought we could do it, we're gonna just skip past it or we're not gonna see them, right? So if we're
Yeah.
focused and our vision is on the future self we're becoming, then the opportunities will arise and we will actually see them and take action towards them because that's what's required.
Yeah, exactly. So as we're in this space about talking about our future self, right? And what we need to do. So before we go into that conversation around how to design that future vision that pulls you forward, let's just talk a little bit about why people don't create vision for themselves, right? And that's an important question to acknowledge, to have, to ponder on before you go over here, right? And part of it is, at a core level, is that clarity feels comfortable. I mean, sorry, clarity can feel uncomfortable. And who wants to feel uncomfortable, right? I mean, who wants to grow? It's easier to stay just status quo, right? And just kind of maneuver through life. But it's in that uncomfortable space where the magic and the fireworks can really happen. So on an honest level, clarity can feel uncomfortable. And the reasons why people avoid it are four different reasons why. One, fear of choosing something wrong. Like, what if I choose this and it doesn't work out? What if I choose this and it doesn't lead me to where I really want to go? Right. So it's better to stay in the familiar than it is to choose something that could be right, could be wrong. Right. Also, and I've seen this for my own self too, is the fear of outgrowing people. There are some friendships in my life that I have outgrown because of my past self that I was willing to tolerate. But I do have to say, though, through the power of coaching, I got clarity around why I outgrew some certain individuals in my life. And that's not a comfortable thing to have to do because, it's kind of feels nice to be fogged in a little bit sometimes, right? But it's like when that fog lifts and you get that sunshine of aha, it's like, oh, okay. This is why I outgrew my relationships over here and here, right? And a lot of people have that, well, like they're a good person, but they just don't meet where I'm at now. And then and then you feel bad and then you feel guilty. And then it's like, okay, let me go back into the fog bin because it's easier to stay there, right? So the fear of outgrowing people can be huge. Um, and then there's that fear of responsibility. Like I have this clear vision of where I want to go in the future version of myself. But shit, that's going to take A and B and C responsibility. Do I want do I want to undertake that, right? To be the version of myself that I want to be. And then there's that fear of being seen. Now, you can kind of see that in two different lenses, right? Like if you're an extrovert, like fear of being seen, that for me, that really doesn't bother me because like I'm very much an extrovert, but I have a lot of introvert friends who they're like, nah, like I want to operate in the background. Like that's just where I'm comfortable. But it's just like I see something in them a lot of times that they don't see within themselves that would make them so much happier. But part of that is having to come around to the front burner and kind of be a little bit more in the spotlight.
But even for extroverts, if I can jump in with that, the fear of
Mhm.
being seen could be the fear of being judged.
That's true. That's
Right?
very true.
So, you know, because I'm quite an extrovert, but then I had this fear of being seen and putting myself out there for fear of judgment by those that are my nearest and dearest. And that has kept me playing small. So, we often, we will sometimes, still hide. Even though we're extrovert, we will still hide and not kind of take that next step for that fear of being seen. Because what if it doesn't work? What if I
Yeah.
choose wrong? The one that I see so many people getting stuck in is this choices around, I don't know what the right choice is, so I'll make no choice. And that's still a choice, but it kind of keeps you stuck and trapped, right? So
Yeah.
all of these things can show up. Um, and yeah, and they're
Yeah.
not
And
pleasant.
yeah. And that's very true, Leanne, too, because I think of it in the space, right, too, of I've seen a lot of extroverts who like they know what they have, or they know that they have what it takes to take on the next title level at work, right? Um, but a lot of times they know, but then that fear kicks in of like, well, what if the people above me or my new peers don't think that I'm, pulling my weight, or that I am as competent as I know that I am, et cetera, et cetera. So I do see a lot of people, um, like they know what they have, or they know they have what it takes, but they don't apply for the job because it's like, well, I've never been a director. I have what it takes to be a director, but I've never been a director. So am I going to be considered? So there's that self-judging. And then, well, what if I do get in that? How am I going to look amongst the other directors? You know? So
Yeah,
thank you for bringing that.
that what if question, right? Like, what if it
Yeah.
doesn't work? What if this? And or what if it does?
Yeah.
What if I excel? What if I shake things up? Like, the what ifs can either have us feeling like crap, or it can even be motivating, depending on what kind of what if question you're asking.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And
So
ignorance is not bliss.
no.
This saying of ignorance is bliss. It's not. Like, ignorance is comfort, but it's not bliss.
Yeah.
Bliss happens, right, when we're stretching ourselves, when we're achieving, when we're able to go, "Whew, look, I did that," right? That's where bliss comes in, not the comfort zone.
Yeah. Yes. So to kind of round out this section of why people don't create vision, it's because staying vague feels safer, because clarity will create that responsibility, and responsibility requires courage. So, you know, I think those are two powerful statements, I think, of why people stay vague and why well, I do want more, but you can always convince yourself, right, of why to stay in the butt,
Yeah.
but you can't always convince yourself to what you're about to talk about, Leanne.
Yeah, and that's interesting because if you ask others, they'll also convince you to stay in the butt based on their own fears. Unless you're asking somebody who's taken that leap of faith
Mm-hmm.
already, they might convince you to do something different. But for the majority of people, when we ask for opinions or clarity, if we search to others, be careful who you ask because they will come from their fear state, not from their potential state. So
Yeah.
you want to be making sure that you're asking people who have accomplished or done more than what you're hoping to achieve because
Yeah.
they will help pull you forward. And I
Yeah.
think that's really important because we often ask people about relationships that have never had a relationship or have, had multiple bad relationships and we take their advice. Or we might ask, somebody financial advice and yet they've been bankrupt and lost everything. And I'm not saying that that's bad because a lot of people have and then come forward. But if they've come forward, lost everything and then come back and recreated themselves and they're successful, absolutely ask them. But
Yeah.
don't ask people who haven't achieved more than what you're hoping to achieve because they will come at you with their fear, as
Yeah.
well as that will mix up in your own fears and then that will keep you stuck. And I think that's
Yeah.
really important too.
Yeah. Being strategic is something that's very very important. And, and I know it's something that I've learned better, or to do better, as I've, gotten older and been in different stages of my career, um and you know financial well-being and like all that. It's like, you know like, I think back when I was in my 20s, right? Like, I used to not be, I mean, I was strategic with some things and then I wasn't with others. I just kind of go with the flow. And not that going with the flow isn't a bad thing sometimes, but I do find that when you have the strategy behind it, it actually makes the go with the flow even better.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, if we have young listeners listening, think about that. Think about how to be more strategic.
Yeah.
Um,
And
because
who
it's
to
going to make what
choose.
you just said so much stronger.
Yeah. And who to choose. I think it's so important. I remember I learned that very young in my life. I had a financial planner who and an accountant, and they were both um, they both taught me very valuable lessons. And one lesson was you don't get rich from avoiding tax, you get rich from making money, which was a great lesson because I hated paying tax. And the second lesson was only take advice from people that have got more than you. And so whenever I was taking advice from people, whether it was around financial decisions or anything like that, I would always want to know. So, not so much give me your asset and liability page, but I wanted to make sure that they were in a better position than I was because I didn't want to take advice from people who hadn't done the work or hadn't achieved that or hadn't learned through their own experiences, right? And that has served me well my whole life. And I'm grateful for those lessons. Um, but I don't think people think about that. I think they think
Yeah,
I'll just ask my family or I'll ask my friends. But if they're not in a better position to you, they're not going to give you the better advice. Simple.
correct.
Simple, simples. Simples. Um,
Simples.
simples. Anyway. So, what we want to do is create a vision that actually pulls you forward. And I really want to make this a bit practical for you. So, what I would suggest that you do is to take some time out of your current reality, right? Like take some time out and start thinking about your future and remove constraints. Like if you had no constraints, what would that look like? Think about, you know, 3 months from now, 12 months from now, 3 years from now. What do you want that future state and that future life to look like? If you had no constraints, what could be possible for you? Because a lot of the constraints are in our mind, let's face it, not necessarily truthful constraints. So that's part one. Get really clear on what that future is that you want to create. Have the vision, write it down, like really spend the time to decipher what that looks like. Make it emotional, not just logical. How does it feel in your body in that state in the future? What changes in your life? Like how much joy do you have now? What are you doing that you can't currently do? Where are you visiting? Where are you traveling to? What are your family like? Now that you've got this new state of being in the future. Don't just kind of have it on paper, like see it, feel it, like really embody that future state. Like do a meditation and visualize it. We often talk about visualization as a strategy, and it's so true because, as we said at the beginning, if we create the vision of what we want and we focus on that daily, our brain will subconsciously find ways to make it come to life. It just does. It's what it's designed to do. So create the vision and make it emotional, like really anchor into that. The third thing then is to use identity language. Now, we spoke about this a couple of times, but I'm going to reiterate it. The I am statements. So important. I am powerful. I am successful. I am a leader. I lead with grace. I lead with ease. I create from nothing. I create good work. Like think about the language that you're using because what we say to ourselves more than anything else, we listen to, right? What we say to ourselves. So if we're saying, I can't do that, I don't know how, we're going to give up. Whereas if we've got mantras like, I can and I will, I can and I will, right? Like that's going to propel you forward. Tony Robbins has another one that is, if I say I can't, then I must. So whatever, if I say I can't, then I have to, right? I've got to do this. So come up with your I am statements, come up with mantras, come up with sayings that will help you to stay motivated. Like, I am a badass. I can do anything in my power. Like, whatever is in front of me, I can achieve. I can accomplish. What's the other word? Overcome any obstacle that's in front of me. Right? If we use these words on repeat, we will believe them. So, use this identity language, be really clear about it. And then once you've kind of got all of that, like you've sat down, you've had to think about your future vision, you've added that emotional content to it, you're seeing it, you've got your I am language, then what I want you to do is record yourself saying it, speaking it. Because once we record it and say it, we can then listen to our own voice speaking that into our psyche, and do that every night before you sleep. Like, record that vision of yourself on your smartphone. All of us have got phones with recording devices. And then every night before you sleep, listen to it. Rewire your nervous system, rewire what's inside of you, because vague vision equals a weak direction. Let's face it. But clear vision encourages strong action, right? In the present tense. So we've got this clear vision. We're doing strong action now in order to get to that vision. And if we can record ourselves articulating what our ideal future state looks like and feels like in the present tense, as if it's already here, and listen to that, we're actually rewiring our brain and nervous system to believe that it's true. So I think that's some of the things that we can do. And then, as I say, revisit it daily. It's not a one and done. We've got to keep looking at, what is the future? What is the goal? What is the vision that I'm working towards? Prime your brain by listening to your voice, doing it every day. Reinforce that direction. We really need to do this, because if we write it down, put it in a drawer, we may achieve it. But if we write it down and we have it in front of us and we're listening to it and we're looking at it and we've got it there, then we're much more inclined to achieve what we've set out to achieve. Because your voice is speaking to your soul about what you've created in the future, but you're talking like it's already here now. So clarity isn't a one and done or a one-time decision thing. It's a daily dose of alignment, a daily dose of reinforcement, a daily dose of remembering what you're actually set out to do. And if you've got that vision in front of you, it pulls you forward. You don't have to hustle and work hard and push against resistance. You're actually you're actually excited and motivated, and you're actually moving, and you've got that energetic attachment pulling you forward. So they're kind of the tips that I would highly recommend. Get clear on your vision, write it down, make it emotional. Make sure your language is I am and in present tense, and then record it and listen to it daily.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I just love all that, because it just makes me even think of some things in my own sphere that I need to do that exercise around. Right.
I do. I've got a 20-minute talk on my phone. So when I go for a walk, I listen to it when I walk. I don't listen to it at night. I listen to it when I walk. And it's my voice talking to me about all the things that I am accomplishing, right? And the things that I'm doing, and the life that I'm living, and the places that I'm traveling to, and the experiences that my kids get. And by the time I finish my walk, I'm on fire. So then I come back and I get into my work and I'm motivated, right? Like, nothing gets in my way. So yeah. So listen to it at night or in the morning or when you're walking. It's really up to you, but daily is the key.
Yeah. So awesome. So before we go into our episode takeaways, just a little bit of reflection here on everything that we talked about today, right? Is there's three questions that we want to leave you with. So if you have a pen and paper, whether you're watching now or you watch this episode later, ask yourself these three questions and really be authentic and honest. And the first question is, if I was being fully honest, what do I actually want? And you can break that into two parts, personally and professionally. You can break it into personally, professionally, relationships, etc. I mean, you can do a whole bunch of sub bullets too. But if you were being fully honest with yourself, what do you actually want?
Not what am I
Yeah,
settling for,
correct.
but what do I actually want?
Yeah. And the second question is, if I had to admit to myself, what am I avoiding? Because it's easy to be in avoidance land. Easy.
Easy peasy.
That's an easy peasy. So if you had to admit to yourself, what are you avoiding? And thirdly, who do I need to become to live that life? What new version of yourself do you need to become to live that life? So jot those three questions down, do some journaling around them, take out a flip chart if you love flip charts. I love flip charts. Um, take that out on a walk with you to really contemplate on it and break it down. I mean, it's amazing on how much walking it really allows you to kind of really dig deep if you allow yourself, if you allow yourself to. Um, and also note is that you don't always need all the answers. You just need some direction. So just know when you're answering these questions, you don't have to have all the answers to everything, but you need to put forth some direction so that you can create the goal, create the vision that's going to pull you forward. Anything you want to add on that, Leanne, before we go to the three takeaways?
Yeah, I would say spend time reflecting each day and don't um and keep adding to it. You might end up with a list of 1,000 things, right? And that's cool if that's your thing. And then what are the top 3 or 5? Like get really clear on that. Allow g I think the thing around this is give yourself permission to daydream. Give yourself permission to think about it, because we get so caught up in the hustle and bustle of life that we
Mm-hmm.
don't give ourselves permission to spend the time to really check in with our heart and our soul
Yeah.
around what is it that I actually want. So
Yeah.
give yourself permission to spend the time on reflection, um, and then record it. I keep saying that, but record it. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And what just made me think of when you were talking about that, Leanne, is that you could even, if you're a new entrepreneur, right? And you're thinking about starting a business, right? Whether that's a coaching business or leadership business or product business, whatever it may be, you can actually take those three questions and put it towards a business, what you want to create business wise too. So it can be a both and of self and business, but you got to have the self figured out too in order for the business part to like also move powerfully forward.
Yeah, because business is a spiritual game. It's an extension of us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So I think we're ready to for the takeaways and resources and next episode. So as you know, we are in series 3 of season 1, The Art of Intentional Living, episodes 22 to 33. So we're on episode 23 today. And those are the date ranges that it lasts in LA and in the US and in the APAC. So with that, obviously this was our episode today. Hopefully you got some rich gold nuggets to put to think about, contemplate on, and to kind of tips and tricks to put in your toolbox, and kind of pull out when you need. And from today's conversation with Leanne and I, the three kind of key things that came forward were, one, that when you have clarity, it creates momentum, and confusion keeps you stuck. Yes, there's responsibility that comes in with momentum and courage, but that confusion, it just keeps you stuck. It keeps you fogged in. Secondly, goals push you, and that vision pulls you instead of the tug of war, right? So that goals push you, visions pull you. And thirdly, your goals or your future changes when your identity becomes clear, right? So, if you want to get a little bit more on identity, go back to episode 21 on the identity upgrades, because we talked a whole hour on what that takes. So, if you want some more kind of meat and potatoes in the identity area, go back and take a look at that one. But just remember, your future changes. You become that future you when your identity becomes clear. And when you become clear, that's when you get that momentum. Anything else you want to add there, Leanne?
Yeah, just the I am statements. Be really mindful of what you say to yourself,
Yeah,
because we're listening all the time.
yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
And we're much crueler to ourselves than we are to others. So if you catch yourself in any kind of negative self talk, just stop it as soon as you catch it and come up with an I am something that you are. Look at all of your successes, not your failures. Like, really shift your focus, because what's wrong is always there, but so is what's right. It's just that we have the negative bias. So our identity becomes clear the more that we can look at what we actually have done, what we've succeeded with, and who we're becoming can be built on that momentum, not on the fear and the scarcity.
Absolutely. Okay. Our top books and resources.
Yeah. So we've got a couple here. The first one is Start with Why by Simon Sinek. And this book is a great book because it explores how great leaders and organizations inspire action by starting with that clear sense of why, which really is the vision. So rather than focusing on what to do or how you do it, Sinek shows that clarity of purpose is what drives trust, loyalty, and long term success. So it's a deep dive into what we've kind of discussed today. And it really does reinforce that clarity isn't just direction, it's meaning that moves people into action. And I think that is so important, right? So start with why by Simon Sinek. The next one is Be Your Future Self Now by Benjamin Hardy. And this book introduces the idea that your future self should be the driving force behind your present decisions. So, not your past self, not your fears, not any of that, but your future self. Hardy explains how clarity about who you're becoming shapes the behavior, the habits, and the results that you're having today. And so it's a powerful reminder that when your future is clear, your actions become aligned and intentional. And those two words, aligned and intentional, is what shifts the dial for all of us. So those are the two. And then obviously we've got some TED Talks here. We've got Start with Why with Simon Sinek, and How to 10X Your Future Self by Benjamin Hardy. Obviously the same as the authors that we've just discussed. And then I thought this was a really good one, but it's an oldie but a goodie, Jim Rohn. He was kind of the granddaddy of self-help. He taught Tony Robbins and many others, right? So he's got this YouTube called Believe in Yourself, the journey of risk, goals, and vision. I watched it yesterday and I thought it was really useful and worth watching. So definitely would recommend you watch that one as well. So at the end of the day, as we come to a close today, I guess I want to finish by saying, the choices we make today is where intentional living begins, where we're not reacting to life, but we're actually designing it. We're in the driver's seat. And so as we finish out, I just want you to ask yourself, what's one thing that you know you want, but you haven't fully admitted to yourself yet? because now's the time to get clear and to take action on that.
Absolutely. And I know there's a lot of goodies out there amongst people. That just takes a little courage to kind of, dig a little bit deeper to ask, what is it that I really want? You know, um, so next week on episode 24, we are going to be talking about values in action. Stop saying what matters, start living it. So we're going to be going from how do you stop just talking about it and planning about it and all that kind of stuff, but actually start living it. Get in. I always like the analogy where the rubber meets the road, you know,
Totally.
it's time to take it off. It's getting fixed at the shop and take it out for a test drive. So that's going to be next week, Wednesday, April 15th, lovely tax day here in the United States, at 4:30 p.m. Pacific time, and Thursday, April 16th in Sydney at 9:30 a.m. AEST time. And as always, this is our full series 3. Can't believe we're going to be on episode 24 already tomorrow or next week. But we have some good episodes coming up in this series. And with that, we would like to do our official closeout. So, as always, thank you everyone for joining us for today's conversation on clarity is power, designing a vision that pulls you forward.
And as usual, we hope it sparks something new, an insight, a fresh perspective, a new idea, or even just a question. Or we actually left you with lots of questions today, right? That's worth exploring, worth reflecting on, worth journaling about, and then worth recording.
Exactly. And as always, our mission here at Let's Talk is simple. It's to have those conversations that matter and to remind you that you do not have to figure out this complex and sometimes scary thing called life alone. We're here to have the conversations alongside you and give you those tips and tricks and tools for your toolbox so that you can move powerfully forward as you live life intentionally.
And like always, if you enjoyed today's episode, please like it, subscribe, share with a friend, and keep the conversation going with us.
Because when we talk,
We really talk.
and anything is possible.
So let's talk.
With real conversations.
And limitless possibilities. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good week.
Have a good week.